Welcome to today's webcast on the effectiveness of customized employment for transition-age youth with disabilities. My name's Jennifer McDonough, and I'm the project director for our Customized Employment Research Project. Let's start by looking at our training plan for today. First, I'm going to give a very short overview of customized employment. If you'd like more in-depth training on customized employment, I highly encourage you to look at our website, www.vcurrtc.org. On that website, we have tons of webcasts and even a web course that's totally dedicated to customized employment. After that, we're going to have a panel discussion of employment specialists share their experiences on customized employment. You'll hear about examples of all phases of the CE process. And finally, we're going to close with some case studies that take you through each step of the customized employment process. Let's start off with what customized employment is, as defined by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. It is defined as competitive, integrated employment for an individual with a significant disability that's based on an individualized determination of the strengths, needs, and interests of the individual with a significant disability and the business needs of the employer, and carried out through flexible strategies. Let's deconstruct this definition a little bit. First, competitive and integrated employment. So we're talking about individuals making at least minimum wages or wages comparable to other coworkers doing similar tasks, and in a work environment with employees without disabilities. So this is not sheltered employment, this is not enclave work. Second, individuals with significant disability. So individuals who need significant support in order to find and maintain employment. Next, based on an individualized determination of the strengths, needs, and interests of the individual. So this is a very personalized approach and very person-centered, focusing on what people can do, not what they can't. The next part of the definition is the business needs of the employer. So customized employment really looks at the needs of the business so that it's a win-win for both the individual job seeker and the business owner or manager. This is not a charity approach to businesses. The individual with the disability is providing an actual needed service, good, or activity. And the last part of the definition talks about carried out through flexible strategies. So the individual's not applying for open positions that are already existing in the market, and we're not using traditional job search strategies. We're really looking at networks, building relationships with businesses, and utilizing strategies such as informational interviewing, work experiences, working interviews, and employment proposals and job negotiation. Next, let's take a few moments to walk through the steps of the customized employment process, and we're going to look at each of these more in depth. So the individual starts out in discovery, then moves into a vocational profile or a discovery profile. Then we look at customized employment planning and meetings around that, followed up by the development of a portfolio or a visual resume. Then the customized job development and negotiation, and then of course accommodation and post-employment support. As you can see, these are not traditional terms that we use in the employment process. So let's look at each step. So traditionally, we would learn about an individual with a disability through a series of vocational assessments, where a state vocational rehabilitation counselor might go through some assessments or send them to someone within the agency to have assessments done. This process is totally different. This is all done in the community, in locations where the customer feels most comfortable. We use what's called discovery, And that is looking at the job seeker through personalized approaches in environments that are comfortable to that job seeker so that we can identify their skills, interests, and abilities, as well as their employment conditions that they need for a job. One of the ways we do this is through home visits. In these home visits, we actually go out to their home, have conversations with the job seeker, with their family, anybody that is in the home regularly with that job seeker. We take a look at the environment. We observe what's going on in that environment. Is it a young adult who has certain chores that they do on a regular basis? Oftentimes we might see sports memorabilia scattered around the home. Is that something that the individual that we're working with has, or is that part of the family's collection? We asked that similar question to a young adult that we were working with recently. They had Virginia Tech pictures, photos, footballs scattered around, and it was his sister's memorabilia, but he had taken on the love of Virginia Tech as well. She was a student there, and every Saturday during the fall they would go to Virginia Tech for those football games. So as part of the negotiation with his employer, it was important that we make sure that he had access to Saturdays off so that he could attend those football games with his sister. It's also a great way to observe how an individual access things and what types of supports they need in the home. I recently worked with a young man who had a high spinal cord injury, and so he had limited use of his arms and hands. But watching him in his home, I was able to see how he accessed his remote control and his cell phone using an eraser on a pencil. The next thing that we do is interview family, friends, and other support folks who are involved in the individual's life. This gives us a different perspective on the young person or the adult that we're working with. Oftentimes, I might see myself one way, but my family, my friends may see me in a different light and may see strengths that I have that I didn't realize that I have. So it's important to gather that information from friends and family. It's also important to observe the individual in different environments. I know that the way my children act at home is totally different from the way that they act in the community. When they're at work, they're very professional. When they are at school, they rarely talk. If you were to ask me how my kids were, I would say that they talk nonstop. But that's the difference between how I see my children and how others see my children. It's also important that we understand the individual's cultural and social background. This can affect how the individual or the family sees work in their culture, in their home. It's also important that we understand their role in the family and in the community, and how they view certain things that are important in that community. For example, church is really important here in the South to many of the individuals that we work with. We have some individuals who absolutely will not work on Sundays, and so that's really important that we know that ahead of time so that we can negotiate that with the employer as we look at employment. It's also important to observe the job seeker in multiple environments to collect information. We can observe them in their home, their school, and social settings, as well as places that are novel to the individual. And what can we learn from that? Well, we can learn a lot. Just by taking someone to the mall, we can learn what they like, how they handle money. Are they able to make a transaction on their own? Do they use a debit card? Do they use cash? Do they use cash and wait for the correct change? Are they able to slide their debit card through the machine and enter their PIN? What stores do they go to? This gives us insight into their interests. Do they make rash decisions with what they're going to buy, or do they really look at prices? What else do they do while they're at the mall? Do they go to a restaurant? How do they order? Are they using the pictures? Are they able to read? All of these are important things that we can observe just by our trip to the mall with an individual. We also want to understand non-work needs of the job seeker. And this includes everything else that's important to the job seeker that affects work. Transportation is a huge issue. How is the individual going to get to and from work? Because how they get there will affect when they're available to work. If they're using specialized transportation, we have to consider when is that available to them. Are there certain hours that it's not available? So overnights are not an option, or evenings or weekends are not an option. How about budgeting? Do they need help with money management? Do they need help from a benefits counselor if they're receiving disability benefits or other federal or state benefits? What about recreation and social activities? This is a huge area of life that we don't want to forget about and we don't want to leave out in the planning process. Are there individuals who attend church every Sunday or every Wednesday, and that's important to them, and we want to make sure that they can still do that? Are there medical appointments or regular counselor visits that we need to attend to so that the employer knows that ahead of time and we've negotiated that in the employment process? We also utilize informational interviews, and this is a great way for both the job seeker and the employment specialist to learn about businesses and the tasks being performed in those businesses. So many individuals with disabilities that we work with have no idea about the vast number of businesses in their community and what is done in those walls. And so informational interviews are a great way to see what's going on in a business and also to learn more about those businesses and what the work culture is like within the business. Job shadows and business tours also helps job seekers and employment specialists get a visualization of tasks that are being performed in that environment. And again, what the culture is like within a business. My best friend came down this weekend and she got a new job. She was excited to tell me that when she had gone on her interview and to learn more about the company, that they had a whole wall of coffee machines and bowls full of M&Ms. This was a huge perk to her. It was one of the reasons she chose that job, because she loves coffee, and who doesn't love chocolate? Once you've completed the discovery activities, you should be able to get a good idea of who your job seeker is, and that will allow you to build a vocational profile of the individual. It brings together everything that you've learned about the individual during the discovery process and really guides the guides the businesses that you'll look at for job development. You can think of it as a story, if you will, a story of who the job seeker is, focusing mainly on the positives. Really only on the positives. It's not a judgmental, it's not a biased document, it's a straight facts. This is who the person is and this is what we observed. And it shows what the individual's skills, abilities, and interests are and what their features of employment need to be. This also includes an employment planning meeting where the individual can invite all of their friends and family that are important to them to talk about what the plan is moving forward, and allows us to take some time to brainstorm ideas of businesses and job tasks that would be a good match for the individual. What I've seen in my career is that traditional resumes don't always portray the skills and abilities of the individuals that we serve and the job seekers that we represent. So customized employment utilizes a portfolio or visual resume for individuals that really do highlight their skills, abilities, and interests. And we can use them to share with business managers and business owners when we meet with those individuals to give a better and a more accurate picture of the individual that we're working with. we like to use PowerPoints, and in those PowerPoints use videos or a combination of videos and pictures. We've used iMovie and other apps before to kind of highlight and show a short movie about the individual. And using as many photos about not only the individual and what they have experienced doing, what they did during that discovery process, but also what's their interests and some of their maybe high school activities that they've done to build a nice, well-rounded picture of the individual. So when we're looking at job development and customized employment, we're not looking at open positions, but rather strategically targeting businesses in our community that match what we determined through the discovery process for the individual that we're working with. We're utilizing both the job seekers network as well as our own network as an employment specialist, but we're also utilizing the family or any friends or support folks that are important to the individual. We're using their network. The bigger the network, the better. And we're approaching businesses with the intent to learn more about them. Often as rehab professionals, we go into businesses and we just talk and talk and talk and talk and never ask any questions of the business. So it's really important that we learn how to shut our mouths a little bit more and listen a little bit more. So ask open-ended questions of the business and let them talk. I promise they will love to talk about their business and what they do and not have us worry so much about sharing so much, especially in those first meetings. We want to give them time to learn, for us to learn about them, and then we can share about what we do. Another approach that we use is working interviews. We use these a lot at VCU, and they've been very successful. And this is an opportunity for the individual to go into the business at a preset time for a preset amount of time, so really no more than an hour or two, to show the business owner or manager how that individual is able to do the job or the task that you have negotiated for that individual to try. Oftentimes, individuals don't really interview as well as maybe their colleagues, so this would give the individual a time to show what they can do versus using verbal skills to do that. And then after that, we would be negotiating positions using an employment proposal that would lay out exactly what the task would be, what types of support the individual would need, what the role of the employment specialist would be, what hours the individual would work, a proposed pay rate for the individual. The last step of customized employment would be where the employment specialist would actually work with the new employee and the employer at the job site, providing on-site training, identifying any accommodations or supports that the individual needs, whether those are physical supports, whether they're compensatory strategies, but also looking at natural supports there in the business as well as community supports. So now that we've given you a little overview of customized employment, we want to share about some of the research that we're doing at VCU. Very little research has been done regarding customized employment in this model. And so we were fortunate enough to be awarded a disability rehabilitation and research project on customized employment of individuals with disabilities. We're testing the effectiveness of customized employment as an intervention to facilitate employment for youth with disabilities. And this project is funded through the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. And we're working with young adults with developmental disabilities who are ages 18 to 24. It is a partnership with Transcend, and we are evaluating and comparing employment outcomes of individuals with intellectual disabilities and autism who receive customized employment versus those who receive services as usual. At this point, we're going to hear from some of those employment specialists and research staff, both from VCU and Transcend, regarding the work that's been done thus far in the project.
Hi, I'm Marianne Beckman from Transcend. I'm the site coordinator for a customized employment grant with VCU.
I am Jenny Light, and I also work for Transcend, and I am an employment consultant.
I am Caitlin Jones. I work for VCU ROTC, and I'm an employment specialist.
All right, we're here today to have a panel discussion on customized employment in this project. Why don't we start out with the discovery process? Caitlin and Jenny, visiting the home of a person is recommended first step in the discovery process. What have you learned by going into a person's home that you might not have noticed if you've skipped that step? Caitlin, would you like to go first?
Yes. By going to my job seeker's home, Jane, I was able to see her interact with her family members, observe her in a comfortable setting, and this allowed me to see how she appropriately communicates with her family members, and that helps me communicate with her more effectively.
And I would agree that being in a job seeker's comfortable environment is very important. I think they come in a much more informal way. They aren't dressed to impress, they're comfortable. One of my job seekers came out with his John Deere cap, his camouflage sweatshirt, and his Carhartt pants, so it was easy to see what his interests may be.
Okay, thank you. Caitlin, can you tell us about a discovery activity that really helped you to get to know one of your job seekers?
Yes, so a discovery activity that I got to know my job seeker, Robert, was really important because I had to build up a lot of trust and rapport with him. So we started with a discovery activity at the Science Museum. He's a physics major at VCU, and I really wanted to learn more about what type of science he was interested in. And this discovery activity allowed me to find out more about that. And then just as we got more comfortable and he trusted me more, I was able to go to his one of his science classes, and I learned that he was very outspoken and answered a lot of questions. So I was able to learn these things through discovery.
Okay. Jenny, can you think of an example?
Sure, I have a participant who loves to ride her bike. So one of the discovery activities was going for a bike ride around her neighborhood, and to just see the way that she was able to navigate herself with safety rules, other cars on the road. She had a very huge level of independence when she was on her bike. She didn't need a lot of other supports. It was her own little world. So that was good for me to see these are the things she's able to do and has a level of independence when she's involved in something she enjoys.
Okay, thank you. So as you're going through your discovery, why do you think it's important then to identify employment themes for a job seeker?
I think it's very important because it's more individual specific for the job seeker. It allows the employment specialist to have more of a direct path when looking at different businesses. And it's going off the interests and strengths and abilities of the job seeker and not just a broad bucket of information.
Right, you're kind of looking at what the job seeker wants instead of what an employer may want. So we are able to pick a general category that has the strengths and the interests of the job seeker, and we can move on from there in terms of where we will conduct our informational interviews.
Jenny, would you like to go first and give us an example of how you've identified an employer's needs for a specific job seeker?
Sure, I think that goes back to when we go into an employer doing a lot more listening than talking, asking those questions that are open-ended and looking around the environment to see what are those jobs that seem to be unattended to because there are bigger tasks to be completed in their place of work.
A specific example that I have was observing in a grocery store. I was kind of observing and I noticed that they kind of they had messy and unorganized aisles, and one of my job seekers had experience with this, which was called facing, which was organizing the different boxes and making sure they were put in place and there weren't boxes on the floor. So I scheduled an informational interview, which is important in this process, and had a conversation with the manager of the grocery store that I observed and customized this employment for the job seeker.
And me too, in a place of employment, it was a small engine shop, and many tractors were on display to be bought and sold, and all of them were covered with dust and dirt. And seeing that they wanted to present their machines in a good way, I was able to ask, who does the cleaning of these machines? How do you keep up with that? And he could then comment on, well, we used to keep that very clean, and we don't have someone to do that anymore. So it's just asking those questions and listening.
Okay. How do you describe the benefits of customized employment to an employer?
I think it's important to let that employer know that by customizing a position, they can build a job task to the strengths of the job seeker. So you can take those interests and those strengths of our job seekers, they can look at what they need to do to operate in an efficient way, and they can customize that position for that job seeker.
I agree with Jenny.
Okay. So why would an employer want to customize a job for a person with a disability?
I think a person would want to customize a job with someone with a disability because it frees up maybe an employee that they are taking over some tasks that aren't a part of their job duties. Maybe not paying that coworker overtime. Or usually with a person with a disability in the community, it bumps up or improves the employee's morale.
I think it improves the culture of the whole company. When you have someone that is working there with a disability, they are seen as productive members of that business, and that they can do just as much good as all of the other employees in that business.
Okay. So can you share with us, what do you think the benefits of customized employment are for the job seeker, for that individual with disabilities?
I think there's a lot of benefits. It gives them a sense of community, a sense of purpose. It can boost their confidence by going into work. They gain friendships, relationships.
I agree. I think it's the fact that it's customized, it again is to the strengths and interests of that job seeker. So they go into a job feeling comfortable and confident in what they're doing. They know they can perform this task, which then translates into them being wanted at that place of employment. People are glad that they're there, and it creates that community and the friendships that Caitlin's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So next we'll move into, each of you have that chance to go through a case study with really specific examples on what we just talked about. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm introducing Sarah. I'm her employment specialist. I've been working with Sarah since January 2018, and she's 21 years old. So let's start with discovery. Discovery was really important with Sarah. My first visit with her was at her home. I remember her opening the door with a bright smile. She immediately grabbed my jacket, hung it up, great personality. I remember thinking, wow, she has a great personality. I sat on the couch with her mom, and we just had a conversation. We all had a conversation. Sarah involved as well, and I got to know that she really likes spending time with her dog. She loves to dance and sing. She went to school at Norfolk Academy and had a lot of work experiences, which included being involved in a vet tech. She worked at a gym. She was currently involved in an internship at Hospitality Food Services. And the next thing we did was we wanted to get to know each other a little bit more, so we went into our discovery activity. So with our discovery activity, the very first thing we did was we went to a smoothie shop. I remember at my home visit with Sarah, her mom told me that was her absolutely favorite thing. And if we wanted to get to know each other a little bit more and have her tell me a little bit more about herself, was to go to a smoothie shop and just kind of sit with her, play games. We observed them getting some of the smoothies put together, and I really got to know Sarah a lot more. And when we were at the smoothie shop, she invited me to her internship. So her internship was at Performance Food Group, where she was working with a coworker that helped Sarah kind of stay on her tasks. And she started this internship with her classmates, but the manager said that she really stood out out of all of her classmates because of her personality and her work ethic. So exploring this theme, I went and observed her there, and I observed that Sarah was very comfortable going through the first floor. Performance Food Group was very comfortable with some of the coworkers she worked with and knew what she was doing throughout her whole shift, and I saw her already getting independent. So some of Sarah's job duties were she was stocking the cafe and the break room with tableware, plates and cups and drinks, and helping the head chef. She was delivering mail to each of the break rooms, and she was stamping the outgoing mail. She delivered FedEx that was coming into Performance Food Group to all the different employees. And she also, at the end of her shift, she would go and help the receptionist at the front desk answering phone calls and just kind of saying hi to all the employees that were coming in. So the next step for me was, after observing her for about 2 weeks, I approached management, and we started with a job negotiation. So the management was very interested in Sarah having an employment specialist with her instead of one of the employees interrupting his day and job duties, to be with Sarah and kind of make sure she's staying on task, doing the tasks appropriately and effectively. So this went into Sarah getting a permanent job at Performance Food Group. She works every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. She makes $12 an hour. And with me doing job site training with her right now, she's already becomes very independent. She learned a lot of new tasks since the beginning of me watching her in her observation, and she as an employment specialist for her, I laid out a job duty schedule, which has all of her tasks laid out that she can refer back to and check off that she's completed it. And as she's getting more independent, I've slowly faded out from her. So first we started with fading out just while I was on the job site, and she was doing it by herself, and she would check in with me after each task. And then we've gone in, I come in later into Performance Food Group, and she would start off her shift by herself. And now we've gotten to the point where I only come in a few hours a week with Sarah, and she's been very successful, very independent. The manager is really happy with her performance, and soon it will only be me coming in sporadically, checking up on Sarah and at Performance Food Group, and she's doing a great job.
Okay, so I have had the pleasure of working with Dan in my case study. Dan loves small engines. The dirtier he can be, the better. That was my first indication that this was a great place to look for Dan. When I first met him, he came to the kitchen table in his family home dressed in his Carhartt pants with his camouflage sweatshirt and John Deere hat. we sat around the kitchen table spending some time talking about things he enjoyed. And one of the things he was most proud to talk about was his side job of tree cutting, where he showed a pile of wood from ground to roof of a garage that he had stacked himself. And he also took us to show his truck and tractor, and was very proud that he knew how to change the oil on those machines and was tinkering with their engine. The first thing we decided to do was do a job shadow. So we knew that he was interested in small engines, and we went to a couple local car dealerships. But because they are such large corporations, they ran into a lot of red tape issues. So even though the store level people were very excited to have Dan come and do a work trial, the corporate offices, things got hung up. So we weren't able to follow through with that. And having gotten to know the family through discovery and doing things with Dan, Mom made us a suggestion. She said, there's this great little equipment shop down the road, and Dan takes the tractor there when it's broken. He takes the snowblower there when it's broken. I think they even know him by name. So we set up an informational interview and job shadow with the equipment store. So when we went to the equipment store, we could see that there were only a handful of employees. It was a family-owned business, so the owner, he and his wife owned the store, and they had a showroom full of red and green tractors, John Deere, of course. They were covered with inches of dust. And after asking questions about how do you keep your showroom clean for when people are coming in to purchase your tractors, the owner said, well, my elderly father-in-law used to come in and clean them, but he can't get in here anymore. And we were able to say, well, Dan is your guy. If he can come to work and leave with dirt on his knees and grease under his fingernails, he's going to do a great job. So they were excited about the option of a work trial. And Dan and I went in, and within an hour's time, he had cleaned 10 tractors, spotless, shining in red, and they wanted to hire him on the spot. So from there, we did a job proposal and began our negotiations. And Dan now works there 3 days a week for a total of 11 hours. He's getting paid $8 an hour, and he truly is independent when he works there. On his latest evaluation, which was a 3-month evaluation, he had glowing reviews from his coworkers and the owner saying, quote, "We absolutely love having Dan work here." So it is a truly customized position where he's supported by his colleagues and coworkers, and we provide spot checks to be sure that things are going accordingly.
Thanks everyone for joining us today, and I want to especially thank Marianne and Jenny and Caitlin for sharing their experiences and sharing their stories about Dan and Sarah. It was great to hear that. On our website, you can find more information about our project, as well as other trainings, fact sheets, and things like that. So I encourage you to visit our website. And finally, our web board is available. So if you have any questions for any of us that you'd like more information about a specific topic, or have individuals that you're working with that maybe you've reached a barrier that you don't know how to tackle, please feel free to reach out to us and ask us any of those questions. We'd be happy to help. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hello there. My name is April Lynch, and I work for VC Rehabilitation Research and Training Center. And today I will be talking about customizing employment and the strengths of a sports fan. So just taking a look at the starting point of when I'm first meeting my client, I am going to conduct an intake, which is really just a brainstorming session with the client and his support network. So the individuals usually at that meeting are the vocational counselor or employment specialist, the client, and whoever is in their support network, like maybe mom or dad, grandparents, siblings, whoever is really supportive in that individual's life. And we're there to really brainstorm what the client would like to do employment-wise, and come up with some different objectives based on exactly what their strengths are, and maybe even some barriers that we might have to work through. This particular client that we are taking a look at today had a dream and passion to work in a sports facility. He had always been told, do sports as a hobby, that's an interest of yours, and he had never really thought that he could actually pursue employment in that area. He had been working in a hospital setting for about 5 years, performing very well in his job, and then he got to a point where he started to realize that he was ready for a change. He really, at that point, started thinking more and more about that dream of his to work in an athletic setting. So at that time, he then met services through DARS eligibility, and then came back to VCU ROTC to pursue employment services with me. We were taking a look during the intake at his different hobbies and interests, how much he was volunteering already in the community and how involved he already was, as well as his different hobbies that he was pursuing in the athletic area, dodgeball, bocce ball, basketball, anything you can name. He's even going to community events that are for sporting events in the area for VCU as well as other universities in the area. And he was very motivated by these different hobbies and interests, and thought that this could be a really great fit for him as far as an employment setting. Another idea with working in this type of setting, that athletic department would really allow him to feel motivated by peers around him that also have similar interests. Although he's there to work, he still enjoys being around people that have similar interests to him and similar goals with being, in an athletic setting. Last, we really went through his different skill sets that he had learned while working in the hospital setting, as well as his different volunteer positions he had participated in throughout years after being out of high school and just in that transition age of trying to decide what his next step was as far as employment. So we really looked at his different skills that he had gained in that position at the hospital, which were particularly sanitation skills, understanding universal precautions, and really just taking care of controlling infection rates in a different healthcare facility. So we could really look at this as transferring into an athletic setting, that those skills would be transferable. Once we got into the job seeking and development stage, this is really where the client, myself as the counselor, and his support network had identified that working in an athletic setting was really his ultimate goal, and how exactly could we pursue this goal. So at this time, really talking with the client about how he would participate in the job search and what exactly his goals were as far as working with his employment specialist. So at this time, we talked about the opportunity to participate in working interviews. This is a great way for employers to allow individuals with disabilities to come in and really try out the job and just show them what they've got. Sometimes being in a pressured interview panel type scenario can bring a little bit of anxiety. It could cause someone to not be able to really show their true colors and exactly what values they bring to that work culture. So taking kind of an outside look, thinking outside of the box, and really looking at creating that working interview opportunity and letting them try out some different job duties, and really just getting an assessment of them being in that environment. At other times, an individual might still want to participate in a verbal interview, but working with the employer, having myself as the employment specialist and the employer working together and really collaborating on how those interview questions can elicit the best responses from that potential employee. And this particular employer that we'll take a closer look at here shortly really thought outside of the box as far as how we could make that interview process comfortable, and coming up with different interview questions that would really get the right responses to describe why this client was of value to this position, and how they could be an asset to this company. Another way that employers could really open their doors up and think outside of the box as far as creating interview opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Sometimes just getting an idea of what that potential business is about, what their needs are, what the facility looks like. So really getting to have a tour experience, maybe even an informational interview, sitting down with the employer or different employees on that site and really getting an idea of what the different jobs are, almost like a job shadow in a way. So really getting an idea of whether this could be a potential fit for them employment-wise. And then also in the job seeking and development process, as an employment specialist, the goal is to really serve the client, but then also serve the business. So getting to know the needs of that employer and really understanding exactly how that client will best fit into their needs, and also highlight that person's strengths as well, which then speaks to the point of having a motivating environment and having different job duties and aspects to that position that allow that individual to feel motivated to go to work each day and to really take ownership and pride in their position. So during the process of seeking the right employer, this is the job of the employment specialist or vocational rehabilitation counselor, going through the process of identifying potential employers that could be a match for your client that's seeking work. Really identifying fostering environments, individuals that are willing to understand the supported employment process, working with an employment specialist or job coach to promote the independence of that client, providing an integrated work setting, an inclusive work setting that promotes that individual being connected with all different types of employees and really being a part of that business and taking ownership of that person being their employee. Also, looking at the job duties that are specific based on those needs that the employer has. So really just dependent on what different job duties they're looking to fill. A lot of the time you could take different positions that might be considered high turnover, or maybe some job duties that are not as motivating to some of your employees, but might work out well for our clients that are seeking employment. And what they can do is really take those job duties and customize them into a fitting position for someone that is very motivated by those duties. So again, exploring that company for their potential needs and how the client can fit into that. Again, going back to the motivational factors, there can be motivation in the different duties the clients have or the employee is experiencing. It can be motivating in the sense of types of people they are working around, and overall just that culture of the workplace. And in the gym, where this individual became employed, and that I'm going to explore here shortly, really getting to know his coworkers and feeling comfortable with going to them and identifying them as natural supports during times when he feels like he might need some extra guidance or support, and his job coach may not be on the site at that time. So looking for individuals that are very supportive of working with our clients as well, that can promote their strengths and independence ultimately. And then a plus as well with working with employment specialists, employers can bring the employment specialist on site to do disability awareness training. And this really just promotes that fostering environment in your company and allows the other employees to really understand exactly the supported employment process, working with individuals with disabilities and really highlighting their strengths. And we can tailor these specific trainings specific to that person that is interviewing and then potentially placed in that job. What I like to do when I'm meeting with employers is if they have like a team huddle or a team meeting, staff meetings that they do on a weekly basis, working with that employer to really set the whole team up for success, and then in the end promote the independence of that client by just having that time to really come together and collaborate with the business of what is working and where there could be room for improvement. So then moving on to the interview and placement process. In this particular situation, the client was seeking to work in a sports facility, and myself as the employment specialist, I went out and met with different businesses and talked to them about what duties were going on in their sports facilities. This was really my time to be seeking that right employer, like I said earlier, and using those job development tactics to identify a fitting environment for my client. Through networking and other connections on campus, I was able to gain a meeting with the facility manager at the VCU Cary Street Gym. And what we did was we met and we talked about my client, and we talked about his different strengths and abilities and how that could really be a part of their work culture and how they could see that really helping improve some productivity and efficiency throughout the business. And what we did is we talked about how they would often work with student workers, because on a university setting, you'll often see student workers fulfilling part-time jobs. And although we didn't want to take away from that, we wanted to fill in the areas where maybe they didn't have that consistent work year-round, because with student workers, they can only be working potentially for the school year and then going home during the summers or during their breaks. So again, speaking to that really reliability, and if there's any high turnover occurring in the business, how can we fulfill that need and give you a valuable employee? So in this particular situation, there are some areas in housekeeping that could really be more concentrated on, and they were working on expanding their team. They had some student workers as well as some individuals from our VCU ACIT program doing some interning and helping with sanitizing equipment and working as far as the recreation side with giving out basketballs and different duties like that. But we also saw that there was a need in the housekeeping, and often that there was a high turnover. So having an employee that would be reliable and long-term was a win-win for both of us, because my client is seeking long-term employment that's fulfilling and gives him that daily purpose, and they were seeking an employee that would fit their needs. So what we did is we took an hourly housekeeping position in the VCU Rec Sports Department, and we had my client apply for this position. And from that point, once we had him in the system, we were able then to start customizing that position to really fit their needs as well as the client's strengths. So also during this time, while we were waiting for the application to process and going through that onboarding or preparing for the onboarding with human resources, I was working with the employer, the two specific managers that would be overseeing my client, and we were talking about different interview experiences to bring my client into that process and what would be the most comfortable for him, but then also allow them to get the information they need to process through human resources. So we talked about how my client may have a little bit of a barrier as far as just having a typical verbal panel interview that may cause a little bit of anxiety as far as sitting in a room and having a lot of questions given to him at once. So the employer and I brainstormed, and we came up with the idea to kind of combine a tour of the facility as well as an interview. So we came up with some different questions based off of what the human resources questions were, and rephrase those a little bit to really fit the needs of the client, to really elicit those responses that would demonstrate how well his skills and his personality would fit into this work culture. So at this time, we decided to schedule the tour, and it was titled an interview though, and we were able to bring my client in, have a tour of the facility, and he was just motivated and so eager to be in this setting and walking around engaging with different employees in the setting and the managers, and casually asking him these interview questions while he's taking the tour really was a great opportunity for him to give responses based on what he was seeing in his environment and how he could see himself really fitting into this work. So as we took a tour of the facility and got to see all of the different athletic areas, the racquetball room, the pickleball room, the fields, the outdoor adventure program, all of these settings were so motivating to my client because this is what he's doing in his hobbies and interests each day when he's not volunteering. So to see that these were the types of environments that he could be working in and actually employed in was extremely motivating for him. So they were getting enthusiasm and they were getting a lot of positivity throughout the interview, and seeing that this could be an individual that would fit very well into their business. Once the tour was over, because my client had established rapport with the employer as well as the different managers that were interviewing us throughout the tour, we were able to then go into the conference room and really just talk about who he is as a person and what he could bring, what his strengths were and what he could bring to their business and that particular position. And we brainstormed a job description at that point. So it really was a rewarding experience, not only for the client, but then also for the employer, because they were able to see that thinking outside of the box and having different interview opportunities really gives a different chance to individuals that may not fit into that cookie cutter interview process. So really, arranging that tour, rephrasing those interview questions gave the confidence to my client to perform in an interview experience. From that point, we were able to then confirm a start date, and the client was able to then consider himself an employee of the VCU Cary Street Gym.
Thanks everybody so much. It was a great presentation with some very dynamic speakers. I think it's great that we got to hear from quite a few of the presenters. And now we'll go ahead and move over to the question and answer period. I'd like to invite you to meet Jennifer McDonough. She is our person for question and answer today. And it looks like we have a couple of questions already lined up. If anybody else has any questions, please put them in the Q&A box right now, and we'll try to get to all of them. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And I've seen some of the questions come in, and so I had been typing the last few minutes to respond to them. I see that there is one from Vicki asking about, prior to the interview, are you prepping with the client for the interview? And we absolutely are. We're working with the individual that we serve to assist them in preparing for that interview, and in whatever way that they're able to communicate with the employer. So maybe it's creating a PowerPoint presentation, maybe taking some video of them at different businesses doing different tasks if they're still in school, prior to COVID, that is, and they were going out to job sites. We would get some video of them at job sites, because many times the individuals that we work with, they may not be able to explain what they do well verbally, but they can certainly show an employer what they can do, which is, why a lot of times we'll do working interviews to really show the employer their abilities, rather than have them try to verbally share that.
That makes so much sense. It seems to me that many of us would benefit from doing it that way as well. I think that might be a better way for employers to learn about a candidate of any type. I see that you've answered a couple of the questions already. I do have a few more that have come up in the time since the webinar has ended. Carolyn asks, what is the difference between customized and supported employment?
So supported employment is really looking at the community and what jobs are currently available, what is already out there. And whereas customized is, instead of with supported employment, you're kind of taking the person and placing them into a position that already exists. Customized is more at looking at the individuals, their strengths and their abilities, and then going into that business and finding out where their needs are. They may have needs that they've never even considered, and it's typically jobs that are not already out there. So it's going through and doing a tour with the business and saying, you know, why are all these boxes over here in this one area? And I did this at an attorney's office. I had a family member who worked at a large attorney's office, and I said, hey, you know, could I come in and talk with one of the attorneys or HR managers about what we do and learn a little bit more about what you all do. And as she toured me around, I'm a very visual person. So as she toured me around, there were literally an entire room full of boxes all along the hallway. And I said, what's going on here with all these boxes? And she's like, oh, well, you know, they all have to be processed. And I was like, well, what does that look like? Well, we have to take out all of the clips. We have to sort through them. Certain things have to be scanned. Certain things have to be shredded. And all of that has to be moved through the system before we can put them into a storage facility. And, you know, some has to be scanned, some then goes back in the boxes. And I was like, well, who's doing that now? Well, we don't have anybody to do that. You know, we have an intern that comes in every so often. And so I was like, you know what? I've got somebody who I bet could help you with that. And so we brought that individual in, had them show them their abilities, and they are still working today. And I think she's been working there over a year.
Wow. That makes so much sense. I think it's something that people overlook, is just trying to find those unmet needs so that the employers know what's in it for them. You can look around their environment and see how you can help them in a way that, you know, maybe it isn't being covered, like the box situation for that employer, and maybe they're not seeing it as an opportunity the way that that somebody who's going through and looking at a place for customized employment would know what to look for. So that's really great. Next question, let's see here. Customized employment is the ideal. However, its benefit as a targeted service does take considerable time. The person who's asking the question, Maria, says, my experience with Access VR is that there is then a long wait list for individuals to receive services from a provider. Do you have any suggestions or comments about that?
You know, I don't know what state Maria's from and what their situation is. I know that oftentimes our VR system here often has a wait list as well, depending on what's going on. I would say continue to reach out regularly to your VR provider and check in on them and see where things stand. I would also look at, are there universities or private agencies that have any grants going on? That the first presentation where I was talking, that's a grant, a research grant that we're doing. So there may be research grants that are in the state that would give opportunities to individuals that are outside of what the standard protocol is for your state VR services.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. And just jumping off of that springboard, how can people get a hold of the person in their state that would be in charge of customized employment? Is there a way for folks to reach out by state? Some folks, one of our questioners, commenters, has been having issues with their local person. So is there a state contact for customized employment for each of the states?
Our state has someone who assigned to customized employment through our state vocational rehab services agency. I don't know if that is how it works in every state. You know, you would have to check in with your, I would just encourage you to contact your state VR, maybe do a little Googling on their website to see if you can find any information related to that. But Virginia has been, I don't know if we're ahead of the curve or but on the curve or where we are, but we have been very fortunate that our VR is actually vendoring customized employment services. And I know that not every state has been doing that, but there are definitely some opportunities across the country.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jennifer, for that answer. We have another question. Janet asks, do you have any experience finding customized employment with an individual who needs a communication/behavior intervention aid and the individual is nonverbal? If you haven't had specific experience, do you have any insights of how you might tackle that?
We have worked with individuals who need that type of assistance, and we have a number of individuals who we have worked with who have autism, who have behavior supports that they needed in order to continue their employment, and we were able to provide that behavior support due to our expertise, but we also have had some individuals come through through our services who had limited verbal skills, and we had to either they came in with a way to communicate with us and the business, or we had to figure out a way for them to communicate with with us and the business. And you know, it really is dependent on the individual and really their skills and experience. You know, like many of the individuals that I've worked with are coming straight from the schools or still in the schools and transitioning out. So I've been looking at how are they communicating in the schools and at home, and how can we adapt that in the business environment. And what I typically see is that once you find the right match for what they're interested in doing and enjoy doing, you know, there's very limited, dependent on the situation, interaction that has to be verbal, you know, that they're able to communicate their needs through whichever means that they're already using to communicate. And we're just facilitating and educating the business and maybe specific coworkers that they look to on how to best communicate with them.
That makes a lot of sense. When folks need an extra boost, just letting them know what they can do to help. A lot of the times folks want to help, but maybe don't know what to do. So helping prepare them to help their colleague or their employee, I think that totally makes sense. Everybody in the audience, thanks so much again for joining us on the webinar. I have 2 questions left, so I'm going to open it up and ask that if you do have any more questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. We won't keep the webinar running if we don't have any questions left, but I just want to give everybody the opportunity right now, kind of the last call for questions. Yes, Rebecca, we do provide CRCs for this. We'll make an announcement at the end of the webinar for that. It looks like we have one more question. Keith asks, so it looks like the efforts to identify a possible business, you're predominantly going off of what is the interest of the participant, but once you go to the business and ask the manager about the business, that's when you are kind of looking for those opportunities for one of the clients to find something that might be in their wheelhouse when you get there, and it might not be an identified need from the employer. That's about right?
That's good. Yeah, I actually do training for employment specialists around the country, and one of the activities that we do is we say, here's some interest areas, for example, automobiles.
Mhm.
And so think of as many businesses as you can, or categories of business that you can relate back to automobiles. So, people come up with the standard, well, there's car dealerships, and then, well, there's auto parts stores. And then, well, what about car washes? And, so I always start with what are the individual's interests, and then through my own and the individual and their kind of family system or support team, we brainstorm out what falls in those categories. And so while it may look like it's a small little area of interest, you can really break that out into a number of areas. And so I start there, and then, like Keith said, then go from there.
That sounds like a lot of creative problem solving and thinking outside the box. I think that that sounds like a something that's pretty interesting. People aren't always going to see it the same way and see what opportunities there are, but if you open up your mind and get creative, I think that there are a lot of opportunities out there.
And I think it's hard sometimes for employment specialists or job coaches, because oftentimes they're working by themselves, and so they only see what they see. And so I always encourage them to work with someone else, or to meet weekly with their coworkers, even if it's via Zoom or whatever way, so that they can brainstorm when they're hitting that wall, when they say,
Sure.
well, my person's interested in cars, but I've tried every car dealership in town, and they're not interested in hiring anybody, and they have no needs because nobody's buying cars right now. Well, that's just a small segment. So
Right.
my coworker may go, well, yeah, but what about this type of business? Have you tried them? And then somebody else will say, oh, well, I know someone that works over here at this other business. And so that's always a great way to kind of be able to see the problem a little bit better.
Super. I have one more question in the question box right now. Pamela asks, how are you seeing CE aspects being conducted in schools and transition programs? How do you prepare teachers for customized employment?
That is a really good question. I don't know that I can answer that right now. I know that we are talking about discovery with our school systems, and we're talking with teachers in our school systems about discovery as early as middle school. And we're doing some training in the middle schools around that. So that is, something that we have been doing locally. I don't know that it's, if that's just an initiative that we have here in the state, and I apologize. But that is where it is starting to emerge, at least. And, what I have seen in my experience is that a lot of times teachers say, well, we just don't know what happens to the kids once they leave the schools. And so then they don't know the possibilities that are out there. And so we try really hard to go back to the schools and say, this is what is happening, and this is what happened to your student after they left school. They went on to get this type of job doing this type of work, and so going back that way. And I see that Star has mentioned pre-ets. That's a great suggestion, with pre-ets being now available in the school system. That's a great way to start kind of looking at the discovery process at a younger age.
Yeah, I know that there are starting to be some resources for the transitioning with students. One of the other grants that our organization works on was the Promise Grant, and it helped students who were at the age where they're becoming an adult be ready for it. And they start as early as age 14, getting resources for students that age and helping them kind of ease that transition into adulthood. I think that kind of the earlier folks start thinking about what they want to do or looking at what their interests are, the easier it'll be once you transition to being an adult, because it has enough challenges of its own, doesn't it? Pamela says in Minnesota, we're conducting a training beginning next week to prepare teachers to collaborate on discovery and job development. Pamela, that's wonderful. Are there resources for that? Is that something anyone can join? Do you have like any links to go to register for that, or is it Minnesota specific? I guess it's kind of weird to ask questions of an audience member. All right.
She has shared her contact information.
There we go. Pamela shared her email address. So if you want to get a hold of her and learn about the webinar that they're having, yeah, it is hard to talk, isn't it? It's hard for me to talk, and I even have a microphone. So thanks for sharing the information, Pamela. Hopefully folks can go and learn from that webinar. And that comes to the end of our questions. Jennifer, did you have anything you'd like to add before we close out the webinar?
No, just thank you all for participating. And, you know, if you have questions that you think about after you leave today or next week or next month, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to field questions and talk you through some of the strategies that we've used with different individuals and businesses.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for answering questions and also for being available. I'd like to invite our audience to join us next week. We have a webinar that is specifically designed to help folks who are working as VR counselors to develop relationships with employers and to work with employers to give them the tools that they need to successfully work with some folks who you are helping to get jobs. So the title is Creating an Inclusive Work Culture, What Employers Need to Know. And we will be presenting that next week, Thursday, August 20th, and it will be at 11 a.m. Central Time. Please go to our website, projecte3.com, and register for the webinar if that sounds like a topic you'd be interested in. Just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thanks to our ASL interpreters for doing such a great job today. And thanks everybody, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Take care.